What is Bitcoin doing? Well, Bitcoin is dematerializing the accountants, the auditors, the compliance function, the information technology function, the human resources function, all the security function, the facilities function, the police force, the military, the function of war, and the function of politics. All of those things are dematerializing and they're collapsing into the Bitcoin network. And so on one side, the 20th century, if you want to do something, you operate a business. If you operate a business, like I'm a publicly traded business, I need accountants. And every 3 months, we close our books. Every 3 months, the gold standard of business operations is you close your books quarterly, and you have finance people and accountants that do the book close. And I've been a public company officer for like 22 years, so I've done 88 quarterly closes, actually more than that. Well, Bitcoin closes the books every 10 minutes, right? Mm-hmm. So you've got an accounting function, but instead of a quarterly close, every 10-minute close. So then you've got this other issue, which is in my world, the public company world, after you close the books, you have auditors. And so the auditors look at the books to verify that they've been properly closed, and they sign off on your quarterly results. And then there's a 10K where they sign off on the books at the end of the year. The audit process is manual and expensive in the fiat world. In the Bitcoin world, you've kind of got triple entry bookkeeping, not double entry, but triple entry, because the books get burned cryptographically, and they're truly closed. They're closed with a cryptographic or an encryption, whereas the books of a publicly traded company or a private company, with a public company, they're kind of open and then they sort of close. With a private company, they never quite close. You can never be sure. And you've got manual accountants and manual auditors. And so those two functions matter a lot. But then the third function, if you look at like a conventional bank or any kind of fiat bank, is you've got a compliance function. And the compliance function is to make sure that you didn't enter into any transactions which are illegal or non-compliant or not permissible. And you can't enter into any inappropriate transaction. That compliance sometimes comes after the transactions are entered into. You see with like Archegos, where you had UBS write off billions and billions of dollars. Well, they entered into some non-compliant transactions where they took risks they shouldn't take, and they found out after the fact, and the cost was billions of dollars to their shareholders. Well, Bitcoin solves that compliance issue with the nodes that are verifying transactions as compliant. And, you've got like 6 verifications before you're sure it's pretty compliant. On the first verification, it's sort of compliant. But the compliance in Bitcoin comes from the process of mining plus the nodes themselves, and it's 100%. What is it, like 99.999999% certain after like the 6 confirmations. Right. Yeah. So you get an automated process, which is distributed, which is almost incorruptible. Whereas compliance in the fiat banking world is a manual process, and you're not even checking compliance of every transaction. Mm-hmm. Right. And Bitcoin, you got 100% compliance by the time you get 6 verifications down, which is 60 minutes. Well, you could be 6 months after closing the quarter in a publicly traded company or in a bank. Think about like our credit card company. Your MasterCard or your Visa, and you're doing all these transactions. What percentage of them are 100% compliant and when? Mm-hmm. In fact, you could be 6 months after the quarter closes, and you would still have lots and lots of non-compliant transactions. They pass through the system, right? And that's fraud. and the economy pays the price on that. You go to the next level, right? IT, a bank or a money transfer agent in the fiat world has a big IT department and a bunch of data centers. Whereas in the Bitcoin world, the miners and the nodes, that is the IT infrastructure. So it's completely decentralized and self-maintaining and self-healing, and it's continually upgrading itself through the process of mining. Whereas the banks, they have to have an IT department and an IT budget, and they have to continually invest in this or they become obsolete. Well, so the fiat bank also has human resources department. You have to hire people, to order the equipment, to configure the equipment, to upgrade the equipment, to do the compliance, to do the accounting, to do the transactions. Well, Bitcoin doesn't have a human resources department, right? Because there are no employees. You've kind of dematerialized it. Why is that interesting? If there's no human resources department, there's nobody to quit, right? There's no one to fire. There's no one to complain. There's no one to harass because there isn't a human resources department at all. So you can see we have taken all of these human factors and we have dematerialized them into the protocol and the decentralized hardware, which is continually being upgraded unless it isn't, right? And if it isn't upgraded, if you're running a node and you don't upgrade, you fall out of consensus and you just get sloughed off the network. And if you're a miner and you're running on 4-generation-old mining equipment, then you become 100 times more inefficient, and then you can't mine any Bitcoin and you get pushed off the network. And if you're running a miner and you don't pay your electricity bill, you get pushed off the network, So the network is self-healing, self-sealing, self-upgrading in the Bitcoin world, whereas in the fiat banking world, it requires human intervention to do all these things.
Right.
So complicated. We're doing it. What's the next step? Well, security. In a real bank, I've got to have security professionals. I've got all sorts of IT security, physical security, people with guns, people hiring and training the people with guns, etc. And I've got to worry about someone hacking into that security system. As long as there's someone responsible, then you have to worry about that person. But in Bitcoin, the security is intrinsic to the network. It's basically built into the protocol. It's making itself more secure. And then we get to facilities. The fiat bank has to go and have a facility in the middle of New York City, and they've got a landlord and they've got a lease, and they're paying money and they're paying taxes on the facility. The facility in Bitcoin, in essence, becomes the mining rigs, wherever they might be, or the nodes. And so you've got a much simpler facilities model. In order to make fiat banking work, you have to have a police force, because the next layer is physical or civil security, and that's provided by a police force. And if you have $1 billion in New York City, then you need, or a bank with $1 billion, then you need a police force in New York City to keep you from getting mugged. But if you have $1 billion in Bitcoin and you're in New York City, you don't rely upon the police force, nor does anybody know you have it. But if they did have it, the security for New York City comes from a Bitcoin miner in Iceland. And so security is not co-located with the asset in the Bitcoin system. In fact, security is not related, or the word would be security doesn't scale, or it doesn't increase with the number of nodes of asset or the velocity of the asset in the Bitcoin system. In the fiat system, security becomes a big problem because maybe you have $1 billion and you feel safe in New York, but when you go to Brazil, you don't.
Right.
Or you go to fill in the blank, whichever place it is that you don't feel secure in, at some point, you're required to rely upon the police protection as you cross jurisdictions. And that makes security heterogeneous and manual and expensive. And with Bitcoin, you have the same security on a cruise ship in the middle of the Atlantic as you have in a vault in the basement of JP Morgan in Manhattan, as you have on an airplane. And even if you're sitting, on a sailing boat in the Caribbean and 3 people have guns to your head, you've still got the Bitcoin miner in Iceland securing your asset.
Right.
And it's a negotiation. The Bitcoin is quite secure. It's more secure than you are. You have a physical security issue, but your financial security is the highest degree that anybody in the human race has ever had before.